Hi, this is Barry, and welcome to the next episode of Simplicity Zen. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you could take a moment and hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't, uh, that helps motivate YouTube's algorithm to share this with more people. That's how most YouTube channels get uh, shown to a broader range of people. And of course, if you do the subscribe and you like the webcast, you'll be updated with new episodes. If you're listening to this on one of the many podcast apps, you can go to the website at simplicityzen.com and sign up for the mailing list there. And you can also reach out to me. There's a contact button there. Today, my guest is David Jitsusan Vititoe. He's been practicing Zen since 2005 and has received Dharma Transmission from Fusho Roshi in 2019. Dave is a lay monk in the Open Mind Zen School and is a current member of the Lay Zen Teachers Association. He currently lives in Melbourne, Florida. How are you doing today, Dave?
Good to talk to you.
Yeah. And so you're kind of morphing into kind of being one of the resident teachers there at the physical location. Is that right?
Yes. So probably the main person that helps Roshi Owl run the local sangha. So.
And do you guys own the building, or do you guys lease it, or how does that work?
Let's see. Roshi Owl purchased it, and he's got an agreement through the board for the place. So it's really his. Occasionally, I'll come in and help upkeep the old building. It's like built in the 50s, I think. So stodgy old building, but it's working well for us.
Yeah. Is there like an office and dressing room, all that kind of stuff, or is it just kind of the room?
It is. It used to be I think it was a psychiatrist office. And so there were several different rooms. When they first came in, they actually knocked down one of the rooms to make kind of a more open space for folks to sit. But we've got the main place where we sit. And then off on the side, there's another room where we'll do various workshops where it's more of a casual setting.
I see. And how long were you guys out because of COVID?
We pretty much kept going. I mean, we weren't meeting physically, but
that's what I meant, like physical meetings.
Physically, maybe a year and a half or so. We were on Zoom the whole time, and nowadays we do more of a hybrid. We have in person and Zoom at the same time. Which so one of my jobs is, I guess, I'm the local producer. I have to kind of keep all of that straight for Al. So
cool.
It's an interesting process.
Yeah. So did you grow up there in Florida?
No. Middle of Illinois.
Okay.
So surrounded by cornfields up in Illinois. Very, very Midwestern background. Although my grandparents were down in Florida, they actually ran one of the state springs for Florida. So once a week, I'd come down here and spend a week swimming in the springs, hearing tales.
What does that mean, a state spring? Is that like a recreational area?
Blue Springs. Now there's two. There's the big one that most people know. There's another one up by Gainesville. I think it's run by the state, but I'm not 100% sure. But so a spring that they ran for the government. People would come and swim, and so I'd come down and visit. So I've been in and out of Florida all my life.
So is that part of Illinois? Is that Cubs, Cardinals, or
it's right on the line between Cubs and Cards.
Yeah.
Everybody roots for the Bears, of course. Much to my chagrin, they haven't done well.
Yeah. And so was it a rural community down there? Like, kind of
small town.
Corn and church and
surrounded by cornfields. Very small town, small town Midwestern background. So Zen is not something you saw back where I grew up. So 80s, it was. I don't think it was quite everywhere quite yet, anyway. But definitely not in small town America.
Did you grow up as a Christian?
So that's the interesting path that I took to get to Zen. Is not really when I was young, but when I was in high school, around my junior year, my dad particular joined the Baptist church.
Okay.
And very much fell into a fundamentalist sect.
Almost cult-like, maybe?
I'm sorry?
Was it kind of culty a little bit?
No, but it was very traditional Midwestern, strict Baptist with very specific ideas on God, on the world, on how you should think, and that wound up being a challenge for me. Because you want to be like your parents, right? It's one way or another. Even though as a teenager you're still rebelling, but part of you still wants to emulate them, and so I joined, of course, but. I was always a very science-oriented, logical kid, and so that really set up a conflict within me.
And you say your dad, does that mean just him, like your mom didn't go or she wasn't into it? Or
they divorced slightly before this, so I think
I see.
think that kind of instigated him going back to the church, but wound up getting involved with more of a fundamentalist group. So it had a big influence on my early life.
Did that change like his politics and views of life and kind of that kind of stuff?
Not so much politics. Back in the, what was it, 90s, religion and politics wasn't as intertwined as I think it is nowadays. So it was really more about his worldview and the way you should behave, and don't listen to rock and roll, that's a sin, that sort of thing.
Hopefully you didn't play D&D.
Of course I did. Of course I did.
Well, that's devil worshiping back then.
It was back in the 80s. So I was a problem child from early on.
Yeah. So did any part of, were you a believer? Did you believe in a Christian God? And
I wholeheartedly threw myself into it my senior year, but somewhere around college, it just wasn't working. And it took a long time for me to give myself permission to let go of those ideas that were pushed on me. It took me a long time to, I don't know, deprogram myself in a sense, to give myself permission to really think for myself and explore for myself. So that was a process through college, I think.
What would you say are some, it seemed when you say deprogramming, what were some of the worldviews that maybe weren't healthy in retrospect?
Well, I don't know that I can point to any one particular thing other than it's very much based on you are a sinner, right? You're starting off life as a failure, and you have to crawl your way back up. And so for me, it was a very repressive worldview. That's why I've embraced Zen in particular so much. It's really the opposite in a lot of ways, but yeah, it was very repressive, and I really struggled with things like literally interpreting creation in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested. Just didn't sit right in my head. But anytime you leave your family's tradition and go a different direction, it can take a while. I think it's different for everyone, but for me, it took a while, I think, to, I don't know, build up the courage to do that. But I think I think for me, it was inevitable. It's just a matter of going through that process.
Yeah. Did you have any siblings?
Two. I have a younger brother, a younger sister.
Did they get into it too?
Not as much. I don't think they had they were a little younger, so they didn't really have quite the influences I think I did. I just happened to be at just the right age when my dad was really getting into it, and that kind of created that conflict. They were much younger, and I think he eventually moved away from the church, but it was still, that was
your dad or your brother?
My dad.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they've all kind of gravitated away a bit.
Yeah. So did you, I'm always curious about this, did you have any sense of Holy Spirit, or kind of like a sense of the divine presence or anything like that, like any kind of direct experience of the divine or anything like that?
It's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that in a long time, actually. I think yes, but it was abstract. Yes, but it's difficult to pull apart what's from within and what's something else. And of course, then you're judging yourself, right? trying to fit a particular mold. And so that was a challenge. So I did have experiences, but to this day, I really don't know quite how to put it, or quite how
But
to.
at the time, was it motivating for the faith? To make it feel more real.
At the beginning, yes, and then later it felt like, well, this is more coming for me.
Interesting.
I had the sense that it was internally generated, but at first, yes, at first. So.
And do the Baptists, do they like sing and stuff like that?
Oh
Like
yes.
like
Yeah.
most, yeah.
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 Yep. They're singing every Sunday. Yeah, give me my old time religion type songs. Old style. Kind of little country western influence. Yeah, raising their hands in worship.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I really believe that the reason music exists, like if you go back to our kind of Cro-Magnon ancestors, whoever first had music, I think it was like kind of a ritualistic, kind of a almost shamanistic thing, like designed to make us feel as one in a greater greater reality and so forth. So like it doesn't. I think there's no mistake that chanting and music and so forth is almost always part of religion or spirituality. I think
There's
there's.
something about it. It resonates inside and out. I mean, all through us. So if you find the right music or the right chanting, I think it just it's fundamental to who we are. I think going way back, I imagine.
Sorry, I need to turn off my phone here. So like what was your state of mind as a kid and teenager? Were you happy and go lucky? Did you have some kind of sense of dukkha already, or what was your state of mind kind of coming into adulthood?
I think as a kid, I was a fairly happy kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit of a conflict, I think, religious conflict that we just talked about when I hit my teenage years. But earlier it was, pretty good childhood. I think I was setting myself up for dukkha later. I had the typical firstborn, overachieving, can't fail kind of thing. And when you're a kid in, grade school and middle school, that went okay for me. But it wasn't until later you get into college and work where that gets a little more challenging. And so I think the seeds were planted in those early ages. But childhood was good though.
Was your college in a more metropolitan? I mean, I guess by definition it would have to be, right? You're coming from.
College
Yeah.
was in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the seeds of dukkha that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Back then we didn't have the internet, of course. So I went through the book and I looked to see which one was the toughest college, and that's the one I picked. And I got in. Had no idea how to pay for it, and that kind of started me on that path. It was a small science and engineering school that's still going strong today.
Were you like a kid on a computer type of thing, like TRS-80 or Apple computers, like learning to program and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was one of the early ones. My grandfather actually in the 80s sold Radio Shack home computers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he got me one at 10. And I started
TRS-80.
No, it was a TI 99-4A, Texas Instruments. Yes,
those
right.
little black ones. Yeah.
Yes, the Texas Instruments, the kind where you'd have to write to the cassette tape every time you make a program.
Right. Yeah.
But age 10 or 11, I taught myself to program. So I was always a kind of a techie kind of kid.
What did you major in college?
I had a double degree. I majored in physics and mathematics for my bachelor's, and then went on and got my PhD in high energy particle physics.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I'm definitely a techie type.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, you seem pretty well adjusted for a physics PhD.
Well, I work with a bunch of engineers now, and I find that they all struggle to communicate and relate to people. So I think that's the thing that I bring to the table is I help them communicate and talk and relate.
Yeah. I remember in college I was a computer science major, and we were kind of mixing with the math kids, and and I thought I assumed we were like kind of the cream of the crop of the smart college kids. But then I joined a Linux user group, where there are a lot of physics people, and I realized like, oh, okay, I'm an idiot compared to these guys. This is true genius, you know. Like I realized there's just another level of intelligence that I couldn't even fathom, but they seem to pay for it in, you know, not knowing how to interact with other humans. You know?
It's a specific skill. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
I did get to spend my graduate degree. I was up at Fermi Lab up in Chicago. So that's where they have that big Tevatron collider where you have protons and antiprotons colliding at the speed of light. So I was up there when they discovered the top quark. So that was kind of an exciting time. But it's interesting being surrounded by these Nobel laureates and being on a first name basis.
What kind of physics did you do? Did you do experimental or theoretical or both? Or
experimental?
Mm-hmm.
So,
what was your research?
Yeah,
like
I was looking at probably won't make much sense to most folks. I don't even remember most of it, to be honest, it was so long ago, but I was looking at the dimuon decay channel of the bottom quark. So protons come in, create this big bottom quark, and then it would decay into muons, which are kind of like heavy electrons. And then we were trying to study the muons to try to better understand the bottom quark. So there were 300 of us on that experiment. So anytime they published a paper, I was usually on page 2 because, you know, end of the alphabet. So.
Right. What did you do after you finished your doctorate degree?
Well, the only way, I remember how I said I went off to school without knowing how to pay for it. So the way I figured out how to pay for it is I joined Air Force ROTC.
Oh, interesting.
Got a scholarship through them. So after I got my doctorate, I went off and into the Air Force, and a couple years up at Hanscom Air Force Base in the Air Force Research Lab, and then last 2.5 years at the Air Force Academy teaching in the physics department.
Interesting. Did you get mixed up in Desert Storm or anything like that?
No, that was going on. That was actually one of the reasons I was able to get my doctorate, is because it was right after the first Desert Storm. And I think at the time they had more people than they knew what to do with. So they let me disappear off to school for a little longer.
Cool. And so being exposed to college and different people and new ideas, was that kind of the catalyst of you starting to doubt your Christian faith?
No, I think it was more just that internal conflict. I was at that time, extremely illogical, right, as math and physics. And it just did not, the teachings that I was getting, the very literal, you know, taking this ancient book and interpreting it literally, a creation story, Noah and the flood, there's any number of stories you could point at, and then critically examining it and just wondering, is this really accurate, right? Are we really reading this correctly? Are we reading too much into it? And I think that was really the conflict for me.
Were you disappointed? Was it like a weight off your shoulders, or were you kind of disappointed to like lose that out of your life, or some combination maybe?
Yeah, I tell people the story that it was a recovery, in the sense that as soon as I gave myself permission to think for myself and think through this and figure out what I really thought, I went through what I call my angry atheist phase, where I was just kind of angry and just pissed off at that whole experience, and eventually came out of that and moved into my happy agnostic phase, I suppose. I think that's where I am now. I like being more of thinking of myself as an agnostic, because it's a more open place to be. And I want to work with anyone. I it doesn't matter to me what other people's beliefs or non-beliefs are, but I want to be open to who I'm with. So I like that more open space nowadays.
So how did you discover Buddhism or Zen, or did you discover kind of Buddhism in general and then move on to Zen, or was Zen your entryway, or were there some other Eastern spirituality?
No, I think there's two things. As a kid, I think I was always pretty introspective, I was very much into math and science, but I was always wondering, all right, what questions are we not answering just because I can't form the right question? Or what is it that what questions can we not even form with the mind? And I was always fascinated by that idea that, are we even asking the right questions? And I was a fairly introspective kid. So looking back, I can remember times when I would meditate, although I didn't really know that's what it was at the time. So I kind of had that background, but then later when I started working after I left the Air Force, it was basically we're building satellite systems, these huge ground stations, and commanding and controlling satellite systems and processing all this information. So enormous technical challenge with hundreds of people involved, and I was kind of one of the lead positions, and the stress there was tremendous. So much so that, and I tell the story to lots of folks, is I went to therapy. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and I let people know that because there's too much of a stigma, I think, around mental health issues. And so I did what I needed to do at the time, therapy. I went on medication for a while, eventually came off, but I wanted to find something that would be more of a long-term shift, a health and wellness shift. And I'd driven by the Zen Center over and over, maybe 100 times.
This one that you're at now?
We were in a different location, but yes.
Okay.
And you know how it is. You drive by a sign 100 times, and it's the 101st time that you actually go in. That's when I met Al Rappaport. And kind of fell in love with it. So Zen was really my first introduction.
Had you done any reading on Zen before that, or was walking in the door like literally your first introduction to anything Zen?
I think kind of searching my memory here, but I think about that time I was looking for something, right? And so I think I had done a lot of reading at that time. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, I think was one that I ran across. Mm-hmm. A few others, but
three pillars of Zen, maybe.
What's that?
3 pillars of Zen, maybe. That's a common first.
I found that one after I got to the center. It was on the bookshelf, so I picked it up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I kind of had a little interest, I think, building up because of that. But I was definitely searching for something.
Mm-hmm. When you came into the center, did you have an immediate affinity with it, or were you wary, or did it take a while to get warmed up to it? What was that experience like?
I think I was pretty comfortable. I don't think that's always the case with folks. So as a teacher nowadays, I go out of my way to try to welcome people to the center, because it is a little different than most things we do in the West. But for me, I was fairly comfortable, willing to give it a try. I think I had this hunger, if you will, to find something, because I knew that I was on this path of just constantly working and constantly stressing and not being able to bring myself down or to let go. I think that's probably how I would have put it at the time.
And so did you start, so you walked in and you just kind of grab a cushion, or did Al give you an introductory course? What was the onboarding process like?
Yeah, we still do it now. When somebody shows interest, we typically do a short orientation. So I met with Roshi Al at the center, and he just kind of stepped me through how they do things. It was fairly straightforward. And then I just came and started participating, jumped right in, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Did you start doing Dokusan right away?
Yes. It's really offered to all of the students, at least the way we do it in Open Mind Zen. It's highly encouraged. It's not required, but that one-on-one interaction is kind of, it's critical to Zen in general, and we definitely embrace that here. So yeah, did that from the beginning. Didn't start koans right away, but a little bit later.
What kind of practice did he have you do at first?
Well, usually you're starting with breath work in one form or another, counting the breaths and that, and eventually you kind of settle in, and it really depends on the person. And that's what we do with Dokusan, right? You talk about the practice. What's going on? What challenges are you having? What questions do you have? Those it's usually interesting whenever you ask a Zen teacher, a question, what kind of answer you'll get.
Right. Do you think the practice kind of, so you walked in off the street kind of because you kind of from some wellness perspective, you had anxiety and you wanted some relief from that. Do you think Zen has provided that for you, or have your kind of goals kind of changed to some degree?
I think it has. Zen is not therapy, but the Zen practice can be therapeutic, I found. And it did, but it was more than that, right? It was more of a shifting of my priorities and the shifting of my lifestyle. And so it was holistic in a sense. It wasn't just Zazen. It was more than that, but I think the center of all of that change that's been happening over the last decade or two was Zen, that practice, coming back to the moment, really giving yourself permission to feel what's going on and give it voice, in a sense, not to hide away or to bypass or push aside, and to recognize when you're holding on. So it's been a long process. Now I leave work. Doesn't mean I don't get stressed, but I don't hold on to it as much as I used to. And I'm much more in tune with what's going on, so I can see it coming sooner. And I describe it like, the boulder at the top of the hill. If it starts to roll and you're at the top of the hill, you got a better chance of starting. If you let it get rolling, pick up momentum, go to the bottom hill, get ready to stop it, it's a little harder.
It's a great analogy. I've never heard that before.
So that's part of my personal practice, is seeing when things arise by noticing the bodily sensations. And
has kind of like existential issues ever been part of your practice or motivation? Why are we here? What happens when we die? Like that kind of thing, or is it more been kind of like just?
It's one that comes up, but I don't think it was a primary motivator. It's interesting times working with that. I went for a retreat at Opaya, and Joan Halifax there, of course, works with death and dying, chaplaincy, all of that. And so I wound up doing some meditations specific to that then. I remember that being very eye-opening. So in and out, comes and goes, but I wouldn't say it's a core motivation. I think it's more about originally for the anxiety. It changed over the time. Eventually, you let go of the searching, and it's like surfing, right? You're going with where the practice is taking you and what the moment is. So you soften, I think, over the years.
I've talked to so many people about their practice over the years, and especially through this podcast and stuff. And I really feel for a lot of people, like what brought them into the door, like, or maybe one way you could say is like, everyone gets into Zen for the wrong reasons, and then like you kind of let go of that wrong reason, and then you kind of discover the real reason you're going to practice. That kind of becomes like its own momentum in a way.
Yeah, I think so. And you can almost see it in students when you can see that point where it switches for them. It's like, okay, you're hooked. You'll be here a while.
Okay, do you have I always find it interesting because I've been going to Zen centers for 3 decades now, and every time so many people come and they never come again, and I always try to say, like, I wonder if they're going to come again. And a lot of times the people I think are going to come again don't, and the people that I thought like, oh, we'll never see them again, end up kind of sticking around. Like I found I'm not very good at estimating the people who kind of get hooked by it.
No. I can usually tell who is going to continue practicing in one way or another. But yeah, you never know who will stay, who will go. It's just the nature of things. You have to find a place that you're comfortable, where you really where it really resonates for you.
So at some point you switched to koans. Was that at your request, or did Al suggest it to you, or how did that work?
He generally offers it. Not everybody does. I think that's the traditional path or curriculum, if you will, in our system. Bit of a love-hate relationship with koans this whole time. I tend to gravitate more towards shikantaza, just sitting. Why I just sitting there and really examining, or sometimes just sitting and just letting go and just sitting.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I do it. Like I had been doing shikantaza for decades before I got into koans, so I couldn't unlearn. Like I just have a muscle memory. I sit on a cushion, yeah, immediately. So like I've never, like I wrestled a little bit with mu, and then what's the source of mu, but other than that, I've never sat with a koan. You know, it's just, you know, I just kind of, a lot of times I'll just not even try to think about it and just see if something intuitive comes up. You know, and it seems like the more I try to figure it out, the worse, the better chances I'm going to miss it. You know.
Well, that's the joy of koans. Yeah, I find that I have to remind myself to come back to my koan practice, just because I naturally gravitate toward just sitting. But I don't know, the koan work is really wonderful in the sense that, you know, occasionally you'll hit that roadblock with this koan, and we found here that often if you really get stuck on a koan, it's because it's something in your life that you're stuck on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been an interesting process. It also really forces you to really, you have to really embody the koan,
Mm-hmm.
to really demonstrate your understanding. And I find that the more that you go through this process of embodying a koan, that you're more and more able to embody life, right, in the various situations we find ourselves in. So it is a good complement, I find. But it's not for everybody, and it's not the only practice.
Yeah, being so analytical and so forth. Do you think that made koans more challenging for you, or do you think it was not a factor? Or
It wasn't a factor for me, mostly because I think I'm a bit of an odd duck. I don't think I ever really had strong opinions about things. I think where the logical, analytical mind gets into trouble is when it has rigid opinions, because then it's hard to unshackle yourself from that and open yourself up to something else. So I guess because I didn't have that, I was much more open to exploring this. And when I read some of the books on Zen or listened to the Dharma talks, it's like, well, there's something here. So I just wanted to absorb it. So I think I got lucky in that sense, because I think it is very easy to stop yourself from exploring. And I tell people there's nothing wrong with the logical, analytical mind, but that's only one aspect of who you are. And you grow and explore that other side.
Yeah, that's a really good insight, that it's the strongly held opinions where the analytical kinks come. That I like that. Thanks. Yeah. So was Roshi out doing the Zen Dialogue work when you first showed up? Were you involved with that at all?
Yes, done it several times. Most of the audience probably doesn't know what it is, or Al
probably not. If you could describe
it. It's a dialoguing technique that Roshi Al came up with. It's a variation of a technique that Hal Stone, voice dialogue technique that Hal Stone came up, and I find it's a very interesting complement to the practice. And the core idea is that we are not of one mind. There are many aspects to our mind. There's a part of us that's the controller. There's the part of us that's the Buddha mind. There's part of us that's angry. There's part of us, there's all these different aspects of us. And through this dialoguing process, he basically looks to see which voice is coming forward. He gives that voice, or you give that a voice, a chance to speak. And the analogy is grief, right? If you're grieving a loss and you suppress it and it never comes out, it can fester and create problems in your life. It's almost like you have to grieve. And the dialoguing process is similar in that it finds that aspect of you that needs to speak and allows it to speak. And just hearing yourself talk from those other perspectives can give you insight into what's going on in that moment. And then you sit and then really examine, okay, what what just happened? What was that?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes.
Was that pretty profound for you out of the gate, or something you had to grow into? Or
no, that's one of those techniques that works pretty quickly.
mm-hmm.
There are a few folks that occasionally you'll run into somebody where that technique doesn't resonate, but most folks really do get a lot out of it. And Roshi is looking to create a more formalized curriculum and make that available to a wider range of folks.
Cool.
So I do recommend it.
Mm-hmm. When you were first getting into koans, did they seem to resonate with your daily life pretty early, or did you kind of like, here's my problems with life and here's my koan work, and I don't really see how they interact, or did kind of the bleed out pretty early? Because I think different people have different experiences with that.
I think so. I think I was so motivated that I was, walking the halls at work thinking about Mu or whatever koan. So I really threw myself wholeheartedly into the koan. I think that's a pattern. I'm just now noticing as we're talking that I've got this pattern where I'll throw myself in. But I threw myself into those koans, and it became a part of my life. No matter what I was doing, I was kind of, not always, but often I was working with the koan while I was going through life.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, some of the deeper insights would be, well, I've been doing everyday activities, and all of a sudden, I'll see through the koan.
Yeah, I've noticed that with programming, both koans and programming, where like I'll have a bug and I just, and then I won't even be thinking about it. I'll be in the shower and like, damn, it'll almost be like some entity like downloaded the answer to me, just like
the shower is magical. It's amazing how creative you can get in the shower. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, in general, for both koans and programming problems, like I'll often get it'll just show up fully formed. Like it's not like I was working on it. It's just like, whoop, here it is, and I won't even be like thinking about it, or at least not consciously.
I think it's back there. It's just not in the forefront, so you don't know it.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's where once we get away from that editing part of the mind, or that critical part of the mind, and just let the creativity flow, some interesting things can come out.
So how long into your Zen practice did you set your first session there?
Let's see, maybe a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
In there. And
how was that experience for you?
Pretty profound. I mean, the practice was really resonating for me then. So, but it's interesting in that he tried a lot of different techniques. I don't think it was really a traditional sesshin. One thing about Open Mind Zen is that Al in particular, Roshi Al, is willing to experiment, try new things that complement the practice. And so we would do breathwork techniques. We were doing Zen Dialogue, and of course we would sit. And so it was I kind of look back fondly at those times. They were difficult. Best advice I ever got. Senior student said, have 2 ways to sit. Sit cross-legged, sit seiza, whatever you need to do, find 2 ways to sit. You'll get sore if you just sit one way for hours and hours and hours. So that was the best advice I ever got.
How often would you come in for Dokusan? Was it a weekly thing for you guys?
In the early days, it was once or twice a week, depending on how often I came in. Nowadays, it's more weekly. It tends to be more done on Zoom. We're doing a little less in person. I'd like to get back to doing it in person. I really miss that face-to-face interaction. But most of our students are online nowadays, and so it's just.
So at some point you were made an assistant teacher. Was that a surprise to you?
I don't think so, because in the sense that you have a tendency to get more involved. As a student becomes more involved, as the practice becomes more about the Sangha, right? Practicing with and for the Sangha. and then eventually, doing small talks here and there, you kind of wind up in a role, right? Doing the role, and then Roshi Al recognizes, okay, now you're assistant teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the other way, where, all right, you're assistant teacher, go. It's more of you've grown into that role, and so now then he recognizes you, and I think that's a good way to go.
It makes me think of Charlotte Djokovic talking about how she became a teacher. She says, like, I'm pretty sure, Roshi didn't want me to be a teacher, but so many people were coming to my room, you didn't really have a choice.
Well, I remember Al says that, yeah, he got Hoshi, right? He just came in one day, Genpo Roshi said, all right, you have Hoshi. And then he immediately was, next day was doing, Dokusan. So it was a shock for him. So I think every teacher does it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you worked with any other teachers, or because you started with Al and you're obviously still in Al's organization. So like, has he been your teacher all along? Have you worked with anyone else through the years at all?
I worked a little bit with Shuzen Sensei out of at the Soji Zen Center up in the Philadelphia area.
That's Al's transmitting teacher, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they both go way back as far as they really kind of came up together.
Mm-hmm.
I think Salt Lake City, I think, is where they practiced together originally. Mm-hmm. But yes, Shuzen transmitted to Al, and at the time, I really wanted to pursue becoming a priest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's not because, again, I like to throw myself all in, right? And so I was fascinated by the ritual and the trappings, I think, at the time. But I worked with Shuzen because I just happened to be working up in that area for 6 months.
Is Shuzen ordained?
Yes. Oh, yes. Through Enkyo, out of Enkyo Roshi out of New York, I believe.
And she's through Glassman, right?
Yes.
Bernie Glassman Roshi, yeah.
Yes. So working with them, they have a very formal practice. They wear the robes. They do the full ritual all the time, and so it was nice learning from them. Wound up not heading down the priestly path. It wasn't really practical. Because there really is no separation of a priest and the sangha. That it's a collaborative practice, and the priest is taking care of the sangha, and the sangha supporting the priest and working together with the ritual, and that never really resonated here in Melbourne. Melbourne, they're much more casual, wanting to explore new things, and we're less interested in some of those traditional aspects. So.
How does the sequence work in Open Mind with you guys? Do you do the lay monk ordination and then you become a teacher, or is it the other way around? Like, where does do you do Jukai first, or
yes.
what is the sequence? I know this has been explained to me, I just can't remember.
No, it's okay. It's he doesn't refer to it as Jukai, but it's a precept ceremony. So take precepts. So that's the first stage where you sew your own rakasu. Which can be traumatic for some folks. And then as an option, they have a lay monk ceremony. I'd like to find a different name for it than monk, because I don't know that monk is quite right. And I haven't quite figured out what a lay monk is. But that is a commitment in my mind to the Sangha. Right, is that I am stepping forward and I'm practicing not just with the Sangha but for the Sangha, and that you're taking on more of a bigger role, if you will. And then if it's right, there is assistant teacher, which is kind of a probationary period where you can try, under guidance of one of the teachers, you'll do Dharma talks. And then from there, Hoshi, which is where you get the purple rakasu, and then Shiho after that.
And so for the precept ceremony, was that emotionally resonant for you? Like, was that a big milestone for you, or was I like, oh, I have to do this, so I'll do it?
It's almost like a coming out. Between the precept ceremony and the lay monk ceremony, the precept ceremony, I kind of kept it quiet. I wasn't ready to tell the world that I was doing this. I wasn't so sure. Well, I mean, I was very interested, but there was a part of me that was holding on to my old life where I knew I was, it was not going to be well received that I'm going off and doing this crazy stuff.
Mhm.
So, of course, I told my wife and my immediate family. So that was my first step. For the lay monk ceremony, I went all in. I decided, all right, I'm going to shave my head. I was losing my hair anyway, so I shaved my head, and that's where I announced to the world I'm a Zen practitioner, and so since that was a coming out.
Mhm.
And
And by the world, you mean your like coworkers and
coworkers,
friends?
I was open to anybody who was interested, and I think that was the culmination of that process I started way back in college, giving myself permission to think, giving myself permission to be who I am, to really embody me,
Mhm.
and not get trapped by ideas about what I should be, perhaps,
Mhm.
that others have given me. And I wonder if we all don't go through that process in one form or another. And some people really have, really go through a lot in their lives with that. I'm thinking of the LGBTQ community, as an example.
Mhm.
For me, it was religion and really finding my own path and being willing to say, hey, this is who I am.
Did you get people be like, "What? You're doing what?"
Well, I got a few. What I put a Facebook post out, and my dad said something to the effect of, "I can't believe you've done this," or something to that effect. So it was very sad, bittersweet. But it does end on a more positive note in that a few years ago, the local church did a multi-religion kind of seminar. Each week had a different religion. He didn't go to any of them except the Buddhist one.
Mhm.
So to me, that's a step forward. He wanted to find out what is this? What is this?
Uh-huh.
So
Right. And plus, it's not like I mean, your path has been. It seems to be fairly secular too. It's not, you know.
I would say I'm more secular.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um,
One thing that did jog my memory. So after I did the lay monk ceremony, the thing that really was interesting to me, I let coworkers know that I was doing this, not to push anything or just letting people know what's going on in my life. And it's interesting. As soon as I had the label lay monk, people started coming in my door
mhm.
as if I was a chaplain. People would open up. People would want to talk. People would, want to know more about meditation or how do I deal with stress. And so it's interesting how a label can really change folks' perspective or perception of you.
Mhm.
It
Oh,
was,
definitely.
it was an interesting process to go through.
Yeah. So one theory I have is I really think kind of at a kind of evolutionary level, there's like different archetypes of humans that kind of society needs. It needs like the engineer, it needs the warrior, it needs the leader, needs and I think one of those archetypes is, essentially the cleric. I think that's,
Right.
like that might manifest itself in different ways in modern society. Like maybe even like a DJ at a rave kind of fulfills that cleric role or something, you know, but like, so I think, when someone sees that cleric, archetype being manifested, I think that there's like a really intuitive sense, like, oh, this is a safe space I can go to, of course,
Yes. Yes.
assuming there hasn't been abuse or something.
Yeah. I think that was my general sense is, okay, I'm safe. I can close the door and talk. And so that was in, interesting and influential in the sense that, I very much look to make that safe space for folks. A new person comes in the door, or a coworker, or whoever is, be kind, give them that space, smile, uh, be there. Sometimes just being there and being present, and being open, can change people.
So for the transmission, was that were you wary of that, or did it just seem like a natural transition for you?
So Al does this thing before Hoshi. He'll tell you about 6 months ahead of time that he's going to give you Hoshi.
Mm-hmm.
For transmission, it's about a year ahead. He tells you, we'll do a transmission ceremony in about a year. And so it's an interesting process to go through. So for that 6 months or for that year, you're kind of, that's your practice.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have this, oh shit moment. Mm-hmm. Realize, oh, this is coming. What does this mean for me? And, all these thoughts come up, right? Am I ready? Am I not? What does this mean? What's next? And so it's this year-long practice, stewing in your own juices, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get there, you've settled.
Right. And you're working on the silks and everything during this period too, right? Like the transmission.
More toward the end, but yes.
Oh, okay. Oh.
More toward the end. But I don't know if you ever get fully relaxed into that teacher's position, because there's some responsibility there.
Hmm.
I mean, I think you become more comfortable over time, but you are kind of setting the stage or creating the space for the Sangha with what you do. So there's responsibility there that I don't know, something you have to come back to and work with and think about, and what does this mean in this moment, right? Mm-hmm. How do I manifest? How do we work with the Sangha? How do I encourage the Sangha? So it's an interesting process.
Mm-hmm. So how's it been working with students in Dokusan and koans and stuff? Has there been surprises there for you?
I'm not doing a lot of it right now. I do have one student in particular that I work with regularly, and it's like once a week for about a half hour, and that's going well. And I've worked with other people throughout the years. That's kind of an interesting process when you're a new teacher doing Dokusan for a while. Another thing to settle into.
Right.
That's where all the more important to have a senior teacher like Roshi Al to kind of to work with, but yeah, that's where I really enjoy the practice, that one-on-one interaction.
Right. And I imagine, Al is such a generous person with his, like a lot of teachers, they kind of hoard the power. Where Al, he, I don't know if power is the right word, but he's just so generous in wanting to develop people and
yes,
and be there for people. I mean, it's really it's really inspiring for me, actually.
Yeah, and I think we see that through all the teachers. All the teachers have kind of in the system here have inherited that. It is really about encouraging. It's not the old school, get the koan wrong, ring the bell, and off they go, right? So there is dialogue. We do.
I can. It's happened to me a little bit. Like you're not going to get this. Let's come back next week.
So every once in a while that's needed, but yeah, I've never been a fan of that as the standard
mm-hmm.
daily Dokusan.
Mm-hmm.
Give your answer to the koan, ring the bell, done.
Yeah, right.
Opportunity is there, I think.
Yeah. In a lot of times, probably there's certain types of Renzai where literally, Dokusan or Sanzen, whatever they call it, they'll be like 30 seconds, and a lot of times, you have 80 monks that you have to work through a couple times a day, so you just don't have time to.
Right. Right. That is the one advantage to Zoom, is that you're typically scheduling longer time slots, where if we're doing it face to face, it's usually 10 minutes, 10 minutes, depending. So it's a little less time, but I still miss the face to face. That's what I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, kind of, what do you see in front of you for your Zen development? What visas are interesting to you, or what are new things that you're seeing pop up?
Well, I'll go two perspectives. One practical perspective is that I'm working with Roshi Ao to figure out, what's the long-term transition plan for the school and long-term planning for the school. So that's kind of a practical aspect.
Mm-hmm.
From a practice perspective, I am just fascinated with watching Western Zen develop, because I think Zen definitely takes on the flavor of whatever culture it's in, and
Mm-hmm.
it's uniquely Western what we're doing. It still has the callbacks to the Japanese style, to the Korean style, depending on what system you're in. But and it can be good and bad with change, right? Sometimes we'll lose things, but sometimes we gain things. I'm seeing a lot of creativity. I'm seeing a lot of willingness to explore, and I don't know, I'm just kind of enjoying watching that as it evolves. I think it gives some people angst. They don't like change, but I don't know, I'm kind of enjoying it. I'm curious to see where it'll go.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? There's any babies that have been thrown out with the bathwater, like because you have practiced at some more traditional area, places. What is there anything you missed, or you feel like you'd like to see introduced back in?
I don't think so. Only because I think there's going to continue to be a wide variety. You'll have your traditional monasteries. You'll have schools that are very traditional, and then you'll have some that are far less traditional and more experimental. And I think there'll be a wide range, and I think there's room for all of those. But I think that's one. If you ask 10 people, you'll get 20 opinions on that one.
Right. That makes sense. Great. So I kind of covered all the issues I was hoping to cover with this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or touch upon?
No, just maybe what my practice is right now. For me, the practice is really about finding that edge, right? What is your edge? Roshi Ao talks about this a lot. What is your edge? And for me, it's less about sitting on the cushion, and it's more about what is practice out in the world. I mean, that's what it means to be a lay practitioner. We are out in the world, and so, when I'm at work or with family or with friends or meeting strangers on the street, what is the practice? And so for me, that's really the focus. What is the edge? What is going to push me a little further? Where am I uncomfortable? And those are things that I like to explore. So that's the practice for me right now.
Great. Cool. Well, thank you so much for the time. And so right now the main contact for you is the Open Mind Zen website, and you guys are soon to develop your own website as well. I mean, and that'll be up soon, but just maybe it'll be up by the time this interview goes up. So do you want to say what those URLs are?
It'll eventually be openmindzenmelbourne.com. That's for the local Sangha. And openmindzen.com will be Al's kind of international organization that he's building up.
And if someone wants to contact you directly, what's the best way?
Probably email.
Okay.
And I can give that to you. We could put it on the screen if you'd like, or
it's probably, I don't want to put it on the text because then you'll get a whole bunch of spam. So maybe if you just say it slowly,
Sure. Just my first name, David, David, Vititoe, V as in Victor, ITITOE 70@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the time. I've been looking forward to interviewing you for a while, and I'm glad it finally came to fruition. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Care.